Joining me now in the studio is TalkTV's political correspondent Alicia Fitzgerald and down the line, political commentator Mike Buckley. Alicia, let me start with you for sort of the wider picture. This is obviously something you can see it very clearly there in that Rishi Sunak clip. This is something that they were banking on, they, the government, they, the Conservative Party, that they want to continue to portray Keir Starmer as a flip-flopper, as a U-turner, as somebody who can't stick to the decisions that he's made and so on. But will that line of attack work, do you think? Is it working? Are people really concerned about this green U-turn?
I think if this had been the first major thing that Keir Starmer had U-turned on, then probably not. As a pledge in itself, it's not something that seems to be really, really important to the majority of the public. Lots of Labour voters do take interest in the green agenda, obviously, but it's not seen as right up there. It's not a top 3 priority, let's say. But I think it's just the build-up of other policies that Keir Starmer has so far changed his mind on. And obviously Labour are really pushing the line that actually, instead of just sticking to things and not being, adapting things based on how much money you have, it's better to actually look at things, reassess, as you come nearer to the time that the policy will actually be implemented. So that's the line that they're very much using. The Conservatives obviously will definitely go the other way, and they'll definitely use it to just say that Keir Starmer has no vision, no plan, and will keep changing his mind if he is in government too.
And there seems to be another associated and similar, but not quite the same, line of attack, or coming from the Tories, which is a sort of better the devil you know. Don't put your trust in Labour at the election, because we are actually the government's getting on top of things, and they will mess it all up.
Yes, and it's interesting. So the criticism that the government faced for saying that is that they've been in power for 14 years. So, it's quite hard to say, oh, trust us, when a lot of damage has been done and lots of the public have lost faith in the Conservative Party. But then on the flip side, the Labour Party still haven't quite got there in terms of garnering trust within the public. There's still a lot of people who just don't feel like they will stick to their promises. There's a lot of people who still remember previous Labour governments and remember the exact same thing and just don't think that Keir Starmer, if he promises to do something big, will actually implement it. So there is still work to be done there, for sure.
And a lot of people, Mike Buckley, a lot of people saying, yes, I'm sick to the back teeth of the Conservatives. Yes, I don't want to vote for them. So I'll probably end up voting Labour, but it's a sort of through gritted teeth rather than fully embracing the Labour Party. And I just wonder, Mike, how much damage you think this U-turn on the green agenda will do, because certainly it's clear to me that a lot of Labour MPs and Labour supporters are very, very disappointed at the way this has been handled and are beginning to wonder, is Keir Starmer in charge, or is Rachel Reeves and Pat McFadden actually in charge, the Shadow Chancellor and Pat McFadden, who's running the election campaign?
I mean, I think it's very clear that Keir Starmer is in charge of the Labour Party, and he has been since he took the leadership in April 2020. And that's been clear by the way that he's led the Labour Party and transformed it over that period, and transformed it from a point in 2019 when we had our worst election result since 1935, I think, to a point where we've been consistently 20 points ahead in the polls for well over a year now. And you say the public haven't made up their minds. Well, judging by the polls, where Labour is consistently 20 points ahead, it looks like the public genuinely have made up their minds. I mean, the Conservatives are down on 21 to 25%. If that's reflected in the general election, that's a huge victory for Keir Starmer and a huge vindication of the tack that he has taken.
Yes, absolutely, Mike. But if you scratch a little bit under the surface of those polls, and if you ask secondary questions like, are you sure you're going to vote for Labour? If you try to find out how firm that commitment is, actually, it's not as strong. And I'm not doubting the polls. People have answered the polls honestly. But you know as well as Alicia and I know that sometimes the commitment and the desire to vote for somebody or some party is much stronger than other times. And it is a bit soft, the Labour lead.
Maybe it is a little bit softer, but I don't think anybody really expects that the polls will not narrow before the general election. I mean, that would be unusual. Normally, as you approach an election, the polls do narrow somewhat. So I think the Labour Party is expecting that to happen. But given how unpopular the Conservatives are, I would suspect it will happen much less than it normally does. And I think it's also fair to say that Labour needs to do more to set out its stall before the election, so that people do genuinely know what they're voting for when they put a cross in the box by the Labour candidate. Now, what Labour's done this week is make crystal clear what will happen in this particular policy area. There is, of course, disappointment in the Labour Party and disappointment beyond the Labour Party, that unfortunately it has had to cut its ambition when it comes to this policy area, which is, of course, hugely important, and Labour knows that. But that is not a reflection of Keir Starmer changing his mind. He's just as committed to this as he always was. It's a reflection of the fact that the Conservatives are going to leave the economy in an even worse state than had been envisaged when this policy was announced.
But Mike, when Keir Starmer, Keir Starmer only said a few days ago that he was completely committed to this 28 billion green policy. Meanwhile, other frontbenchers were being much more lukewarm. They seemed to be able to read between the lines that this policy was on shaky ground. So it's Keir Starmer who looks like he has flip-flopped, where others were already slightly laying the groundwork because they knew that this policy wasn't going to end up in the manifesto. So it does look fairly chaotic.
I mean, there has been, it's been a number of weeks now where some shadow ministers have been saying, yes, we're sticking to 28 billion, including Keir Starmer, as you say, and others have not been just quite so forthright about supporting that figure. So clearly there has been an internal debate, and it is arguable to say that that debate should have happened entirely internally in the Labour Party rather than been had to a degree in public. But you know what? In the bigger scheme of things, that isn't a major problem, and it certainly hasn't affected where the polls are at the moment. And to go back to what Rishi Sunak said in his clip earlier on, his criticism is that Labour doesn't have a plan, and he does have a plan. But it always amuses me that no journalist ever says to Rishi Sunak, well, what's your plan? I mean, we know that on the green agenda or the climate agenda, Rishi Sunak has failed catastrophically. It was embarrassing when he went to the COP conference last November because all the other, well, not all, a lot of the other world leaders were criticising him for the fact that he's backtracked on green and climate policies here in the UK. He doesn't have an economic policy. He says the economy's turned a corner. It's largely in tatters. The only institution in the UK that's taken any meaningful action on the economy in the last year and a half has been the Bank of England, who have successfully brought interest rates down. But that wasn't anything to do with Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Hunt. And you know what? The public know that, which is why their poll ratings in the early 20s.
All right, well, I want to move on and squeeze in another story before I lose you both, and that is that fewer than half of Home Office workers were at their desk last week. That's despite soaring migration numbers, as we all know, and growing asylum backlog. So the department was the emptiest in Whitehall, with just 47% of desks occupied. Alicia, I think this will have people pulling their hair out. People are quite sick to death of the stories about civil servants all working from home and not sort of seeming to do the job properly. But the Home Office, of all places, which we know is completely chaotic and at fault for a lot of the asylum issues, seems to be like the Mary Celeste.
Definitely, and that's certainly what a lot of MPs in Parliament are saying as well. Lots of them really expressing their frustration about this, and they're saying, even ones who really support working from home generally are just saying now is not the time, and this is not necessarily the job that you can really do from home. It's a team effort. You need to be in the office. You need to all be working together, and you need some kind of senior management system. The other issue as well that lots of people do take with working from home more generally is that more junior people don't have the support from the more senior people to actually guide them through processes, and therefore it does slow things down quite a lot. So that's definitely the argument that lots of MPs are taking in Parliament about this.
Yeah, absolute mess. Mike, last word from you on this Home Office, everybody being at home instead of at the office on this story. This is the kind of thing that will really get up people's noses.
I think it will. And actually, I think one thing to say is that this isn't just the public sector. It's not just the Home Office. This is happening in lots of businesses across the country as well. And I speak to business leaders regularly who are working to try and get their staff back in the office. However, people obviously hold the government and hold the Home Office to a different standard. And, there have been a number of reports now from the UK and other nations which have come out, investigations done proving that people are more productive when they go to the office and work collaboratively than when they're working from home. So I think over time, businesses and institutions like the Home Office do need to change their procedures to not only encourage people to come back in, but actually require it as well.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Should we try doing the show from home next time?
Yeah, perfect. We'll do that.
All of us, just
we'll just do it on a Zoom. Yeah, then we only need to be smartly dressed from the waist up.
Brilliant.
Can have our pyjamas on. Alicia, thank you very much, and Mike as well.